Yo, Saturday morning dynamic programming. It's not cartoons. I'm not selling you real estate in Nevada, though if I had some, I'd be happy to sell it to you. This is low key like 2021 public affairs with a little bit of swag. And I hope you're ready for it because Mestizo Coffee Click, we have a special guest here today. Someone who is spearheading a really fascinating political movement in the city of Los Angeles with her campaign for District 9, LA City Council candidate Dulce Vazquez. Give it up. If I had a little bit of a budget, and it's coming, we probably would have saw some fire and a bridge blow up behind me. But here's to you, Dulce. I know you have some coffee, so why don't you let's get this morning started right. Click, click. How's your day going, Dulce?
Well, it's just starting and it's looking bright.
There you go. And has a little, at least something to do with my my mauve hoodie, I suspect. Now, there's a funny thing that usually happens when I have guests on my show who have cool names. I fuck them up. That's usually what happens. And I think there's something subconscious at work. One, because I don't speak Spanish natively, and two, I want to get it right, and I often get it wrong. And then people always mess up my name. And then with Latino names, it's always funny because I find that people have experiences connected to their names. Dulce, tell us about your name.
Oh, well, what do you want to know? I come from a long line of Dulces, starting with my great tia, Dulce Maria, which is usually like the most common, composition of Dulces. But my mom is Dulce Veronica. I'm Dulce Asiria. We have a little cousin who's Dulce Sofia. So it comes a long line of Dulces.
Wow, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that was a thing with the name Dulce. I had never known that. I think the interview's over. That's it. I've actually taken enough away from this to fuck my whole head up.
That's it. It's so funny. Well, it's so funny because, I migrated to the U.S. and my mom, migrated with me. She's Dulce Veronica. So for all the gringos out there, she would just go by Veronica. And my middle name is Asiria. And you can't anglicize that. So I had to go by Dulce all the time. And, sort of the pronunciations, right? The associations that people have, a lot of Americans, when they see it, they're just completely confused, or they go with the Italian because desserts are, pretty frequent, dolce or dolce and gabbana or whatever. So it's Dulce. And, as I've aged, I've gotten more curmudgeon-y over how people pronounce it. So yeah, that's the name. And there's so many of them. People are like, your name is so unique. And I was like, just type it in on Facebook. You're going to find thousands of Dulces.
No, as a Carlos Jr., who has a grandfather whose name at birth was Carlos, but was changed to Chale and Charles, anglicized in Arizona because of the pressure to conform to whiteness in elementary school. Same with my grandmother, whose given name was Amalia, but was really anglicized into Molly, and then Anna. Was an interesting story for me to learn about their names. I was like, why am I Carlos? And my grandfather, they call him Chale and Chuck, and he speaks Spanish and I don't. And weird things, not even weird, but interesting stories are wound up in names, and then how we experience our names. And I've always felt like, even as a teacher, when I taught for several years, when I come across certain names in the attendance list, I'm like, oh, this kid's going to be bad. You know what I'm saying? Or this kid's going to be nice. Or Dulce is going to be actually, I'm not even going to lie. I've had very nice Dulce students. So I see a Dulce, and for whatever in my mind, it's going to be a sweet kid. Dumb. It's not even dumb, but it's really, it's just really kind of straightforward kind of ways we interact with names and the interpretations of them that we have. And I always thought my name was a bad name, that people thought they were going to get in trouble.
It's so funny, the number of times I've gotten into an Uber and they're like, ooh, Dulce, did you know that your name means sweet?
No clue, sir. Yeah, no, this is great.
Wow. Like, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And then, of course, because I don't speak Spanish, I go Carlos Aguilar is here. But then my cousin is always Mario. It's never Mario. So it's again, all this just is a testament to the dynamic way that culture works, especially in a city like ours, Los Angeles. And you're actually running for city council in Los Angeles, District 9. Tell us about the city council race and about District 9.
Sure. So, City Council, Los Angeles, people, often don't know that there's like the Los Angeles region, there's Los Angeles County, and then there's like the Los Angeles City within the county. So the county has 10 million people. The city has about 4.5 of that in the city. And then if you think about other cities that are independent, Culver City is independent, Santa Monica is independent, Beverly Hills is independent. There are areas that actually are part of the county and are unincorporated, including some adjacent parts of CD9, like Florence and Firestone. But the city itself has 15 members. So if you think about it, that's a lot of people to represent, about roughly 280,000 people per council member, per council district. Um, and District 9 is just south of downtown Los Angeles. It includes the Staples Center, Expo Park, USC, goes all the way down the 110 corridor almost to the 105, depending on where you are. It is, one of the poorest districts in the city. There's been a lot of COVID devastation throughout the district. And the election is next year. The city alternates every 2 years. Half the body goes up for election. So in 2020, there were 7 seats up for election. In 2022, there will be 8.
And tell us about the race at District 9. How many candidates are you running against an incumbent? And what are and why did you decide to run?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. So one, there are currently about 5 people who have thrown their hat into the ring to run, including the incumbent. I won't spend that much time on him. He's been in politics for 30 plus years, almost as long as I've been alive. He, has had a long history of being in the legislature, in a different city council, and then now in this city council. There are term limits, so any person can be elected for up to 3 terms. He is seeking his third and last one. I think that he should not have it. But yeah, there are about 3 other people also running. I haven't heard much from any of them. And then the secondary question, I already forgot.
So, how many people voted the last election cycle in District 9? How many people do you anticipate voting this time around?
Oh, so that's complicated too. So the city used to have municipal elections in off years. And I think it's a voter suppression tactic. But thankfully, they have now aligned them to match with federal elections. So the last time this seat was up for election was in 2017. It's like, odd year, nothing is happening. So then they aligned them. So instead of a 4-year term, the current council member got 5.5 years of an extended term. So the next elections in 2022, it'll be on the ballot with the mayor, the governor, the congressional elections, et cetera. So you'll have everything going up at the same time in order to increase voter participation. So back to your original question of how many people voted in the 2017 election, it was in March of 2017. 10,000 people voted out of a district of 280,000 people, 100,000 registered voters. That's about a 10% participation rate.
Interesting.
We expect that obviously to go up a lot when there are other things on the ballot, and it'll be in June with a general election in November with everything else. So we really expect numbers to tick up.
What prompted you to run?
I started getting involved in policy and politics a few years ago. I was really inspired by all of the women who won their congressional seats in 2018, including AOC. I saw her, and Latina, young, badass, was able to do the unthinkable in a very entrenched race where the incumbent had been in that seat for many, many years, and she did the work. And I'm like, we're in the middle of 45's presidency, and I just said to myself, I need to do something. I need to get engaged. I need to get involved. And I started, doing work with the Democratic Party here in California, more and more in Los Angeles. And I just started meeting really, really great people. I was getting my master's in public policy, so really understanding how you create policy, how you create laws, how they get executed and implemented. And then the pandemic started. And I think it was really the pandemic, the city and the county's response to the pandemic, that was making me frustrated and angry. And then the protests started, and I was just overwhelmed with frustration about how the city was um, sort of could not manage its own police force. And the police force, saying that they were, launching non-lethal weapons, but I participated in clean efforts, and I would see the rubber bullets, and I would see the pellet bags, and I just could not fathom how we could do that to our own people who are striving for equity and justice. So I started looking up, and I was like, who represents me? And that's when I decided to run.
And what are like the pragmatic first steps once you decide kind of internally, like, you know what, I'm gonna do this? Do you go online and Google how to run for LA City Council District 9? Or how does that work? How did that work for you, actually?
Kind of. Well, I think even before that, I had to ask friends and family because it's a big undertaking. It's a very public undertaking, and it's one of those things that, like, I've had many failures in life, but this would be the largest public failure if I launch and like no one wants to support me. My goodness. So I asked obviously my husband first of all, like, this is time that I am spending that I'm not with you. I asked my parents because, they've always been very, very private. Like, this could lead to, people at your doorstep. I asked friends, like, would you be supportive emotionally, financially? And when I sort of clicked off all of those boxes, I had gone through a candidate training program. And it's such a wonderful organization called Emerge California. And they train Democratic women and a big focus on women of color to run for office. So, I mean, you know, nationally, we have 1% Latino representation on elected bodies. In California, for instance, women are over 50% of the population. We are still only like 20 to 25% representation in in elected bodies. So getting more women of color is priority in getting equity and seeking equity. I mean, we've had 200 years of all white male led bodies. I think it's time for change. So they were particularly useful in connecting me to resources, sort of understanding, like, how do you run a campaign, but also how do you find the right people to help you run a campaign. So I found myself some consultants willing to help me, and then I found a compliance person, which is really important for the city in order to make sure that all of your paperwork is done.
Mm.
And we were off to the races.
No, that's really a great Your story is a great testament to how we're often inspired both like at a distance in the case of AOC or kind of national movements, but then how locally, if you can connect with people who have a similar vision, you get some of that more tactical leadership training and experience that allows you to actually step out into a campaign and have a legitimate shot at winning. And you've started your campaign, as you suggested, is one of the more serious campaigns in the District 9 race. You guys have started to raise some money. And you've had some early success in some regards. What has that meant to you as a signal when you step out, kind of wondering if people are going to rock with you? What do those early signals tell you?
Well, for me, what it tells me is that people are ready for change, that people are ready for something new, that people are just as frustrated as I am when we see, 5 people die on LA streets every day due to homelessness, that they are ready for different solutions. And I think we saw a lot of that sentiment in 2020, just in terms of who won their races in 2020, very progressive district attorney, very progressive supervisor in Holly Mitchell in the southern part of Los Angeles, extremely progressive council district 4 race where council member Rahman beat an incumbent as well. So it tells me that as people are supporting me, people are ready and excited for something new.
What are people asking for? What kind of changes that will impact their quality of lives are people? I mean, there's obviously we want representation. We want people to look like us. Then we also want people to act in our best interests. What are people asking you to act on?
Housing, housing's a big part. Rent going up. We have to figure out how people who have rent debt that doesn't continue, right? That we either figure out how to eliminate it or how to give subsidies for rental payments. So housing's a really, really big deal, and housing bleeds into a lot of homelessness too, right? We have to prevent, there's an eviction moratorium in the city right now that's going to lapse in June. Um, how do we either reinstate it for more months, or how do we make sure that people don't further fall into homelessness due to lack of funding for rent? So housing is a really, really big issue. Support for small businesses, I think particularly in this district where you have a lot of micro entrepreneurs, you have a lot of undocumented entrepreneurs, right? What does that mean? That means the fruta stand, that means the taco stand, that means the flower vendors on the corner. They all, they weren't getting PPP loans. They weren't getting the Tom
Mm.
Brady millions of dollars. They were barely even qualifying for the grants that the city was putting out. And it takes wherewithal, it takes knowledge to even apply for such things, right? So you're automatically like limiting it to who's able to qualify for that funding. So how do we help these people either push through, make sure that they have funding, make sure that they come back as the economy is coming back, that we don't forget about them. So support for small businesses is, I think, really, really huge. And then the third part of that is how we move, how we think about transportation. This is a heavily public transit reliant district, but we have, our Vernon is lined with parking spaces instead of, protected bike lanes or bus lanes, right? Our buses move just as slow as our cars. How do we prioritize what people are actually riding? How do we think about, in a broader scheme of things like climate change, right? We have so many warehouses that are adjacent to the district. How do we think about like large diesel trucks, right, are polluting our communities? So those are the things that I'm both hearing, and the things that sort of pulling the thread makes me think about.
Yeah, and it reminds us that the LA City Council and all local governments have a budget that matches the council's priorities. And if there aren't people lobbying for a different set of priorities, the money gets spent in different ways. Is that right?
Yes, I definitely think that, well, I definitely agree with you that a budget is a reflection of your values. And the proposed budget by the mayor, which then gets edited and approved by council, has about 50% of the general fund being spent on LAPD. That's $3 billion. And I think my friend Kenneth Mejia, who is running for city controller, is doing a really brilliant job at trying to explain the budget to normal people like you and I, with like pie charts and graphs of what exactly that means for how we spend on other things: parks and rec, public health, community housing and building and homelessness. The mayor's, promoted that we're spending all of this money to fix homelessness, but then we're still spending $3 billion on policing.
Yeah, and insofar as the budget reflects values and priorities, the city of LA proper sets the tone for the region in some ways. So that in my town, where Covina's police department eats up over 50% of the city budget as well, and then you take the fire department, and you're like, oh, where's the rest of the money? Well, if they could point to the city who's doing something similar, then they have some sort of public-facing justification. So, which is why the work you're doing in the city and will be doing in the work the policies you're advocating for, have an impact downstream outside of the city proper, even here in the San Gabriel Valley. So,
I'm I would say not just the LA region, but really nationally. We've always had that, whether it's a myth or not, that like as California goes, so does the rest of the country. Well, Los Angeles is the second largest city in the country. If we start thinking differently about policing, if we start thinking differently about criminal justice reform, if we start thinking differently about how we solve homelessness, and we start thinking differently about how we take care of people, right? How we take care of their traumas and their issues. I mean, you can't solve for drug addiction when people are still on the streets. Like, they have to have a roof over their head, they have to feel safe in order to take care of any of the ancillary things that come outside of that. So if we start taking that mentality of care first, the rest of the country, the rest of the smaller municipalities that surround Los Angeles, but really I think the rest of the country would follow too.
that's right. And even the language we use around some of these issues, if that changes, our perspective might change. Because even as I was thinking about asking you a question about homelessness, I wanted to problematize it immediately. Like, how do we fix this problem, which almost rushes past the humanity of what's happening? And this care first approach, tell me more about that. Is this something that suffuses your campaign, and what are some of the tangible kind of results of looking at policy that way?
Yeah, I think it has. I think it has lots of, and I did not coin the term. There have been people who have been working on this for a really long time when it comes to like anti-recidivism, when it comes to mental health treatment, when it comes to, the response of the police, right? When you call the police for a mental health issue, right? Either suicide attempt or any sort of breakdown, you get an armed officer with a gun. Like, you think about that, you're asking for help, and that's what's coming to your doorstep. It often has, very often, and we've seen it happen, results in that gun being used. The most pertinent example that I think about is always the death of Daniel Hernandez in District 9, just blocks away from the police station. Someone called in 911. There had been a small accident, like a small collision, and Daniel was under some sort of influence, either mental or drug related, and had a box cutter. And they told the police that he had a box cutter. And when the police arrived, they knew that he was under mental distress, shot him 6 times. That is not care. That is sending the police force to use the force that they are given. So when it comes to care first around homelessness, it's thinking right about their humanity. For so long we have criminalized every part of being homeless. It's this steady
Mm.
cycle of like, you can't sleep here, here's a ticket. That ticket, they're not showing up to court, leads to an arrest warrant. The next time they're being told like, you can't sleep here, oh, there's an arrest warrant out for you, they put them in jail. They put them in jail for however long, they send them out back into the streets, and the cycle repeats itself constantly. So we've been criminalizing homelessness for a very, very long time. So now we think about like, well, shocker, right? Like, why are they homeless, right? Why, like, first, like, take them off the street, and then what happens? Do they need mental health treatment? Do they need a job? Do they need a shower? Do they need clothes? Do they need someone to help build their resume? Do they need, whatever it is? Like, how do we keep people housed? It's not about being a productive citizen of the world. It's not about like, we have this American mentality, and I think a lot of Latinos do too. Like, I'm going to go, I'm going to hustle, I've got ganas, I'm going to work. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People can't afford the boots. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, it's about taking a care first approach, I'd imagine. And I'm really fascinated by what seems to be a wave of candidates, locally as well as nationally, who are kind of riding this progressive wave. Where do you think that comes from? Is it? I mean, there's a generation of us that have gone to college, that have worked in corporate or public space. We've kind of, in some ways, pulled the curtain back, and we're like, "Yo, we could probably run this shit better than the people who are doing the job now." So it's a kind of coming of age moment in some ways, right?
I think some of it is coming of age. You know, how do I explain this? I think that there is a generation of politicians who have stayed in power for too long. And I think part of the problem might be, we've always said term limits to get people out. Well, now we're seeing the results of term limits, that people are just playing musical chairs with these positions and just staying in power for that much longer. So right now we see a generation of frustrated young people who are, we're paying rent and might never own a home. We're paying our student loans. Like, student loan debt has increased by like 200% in the last 20 years. So I'm, 35. Like, what does that mean? That means an entire generation who is paying, $800 a month for student loan debt, right, for their education. They're either not making the salaries that they thought they would, because we were sold on this idea that like everyone needs a BA, and I do agree that like BAs are probably the number one propeller into different economic stratum, but we're holding off on having children. There was a report earlier this week that the baby birthing is on the decline by another 4% this year. It's expensive to have kids. It's expensive to like buy a house. It's expensive to do all these things. And like, we're starting to realize that these are policy decisions, right? These are policy decisions to have student debt, to pay banks to service that debt. We're starting to see that it's a policy choice, how we develop land, right? That we're choosing to either develop, more street malls or more corner malls versus like multi-use housing for some of these things. So we're starting to sort of wake up, like, what has been happening for 20, 30 years that we've got 60,000 people living on the street? What has been happening for the last couple of years that like we don't seem to be making progress with police after we've been sold the narrative of reform, reform, reform. Like, we need more money in order to reform. Like, we're here. Like, where have the reforms been? We can't go any further with some of these things. So yeah, we're, there's an entire generation who is like smart and driven and passionate and, educated, that we're like, we could do this better. We could do this better with a different mentality. We need to stop thinking about transactional politics, right? Like, I'll do you a favor, you do me a favor. No, just make the right choice, make the right decision, pick the right policies that are going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, I was thinking of the metaphor of getting in the car with someone from an older generation and being like, Gramps, I'm going to drive. But it's not that we're asking Gramps to get out the car. In fact, Gramps probably knows the best way to get there, the shortcut, where to watch out for this or that. So I'm just kind of thinking of a metaphor for this kind of generational transition that doesn't imply that we're saying the information and wisdom and all the resources, benefit, skill, and talent of folks that have come before us are not pushed to the side. But there's just an energy that says, "Yo, give us the keys." You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm hoping to see and celebrate more of that.
And it's funny because I literally had a conversation with a former politician, female, and I called her earlier this week and I was like, hey, I really need a madrina. I need someone who's been doing this for a really long time, who's like not in the game anymore, that like can show me the ropes. And I'm Latina, like I have so much respect for my elders and we want them to still be involved, but yeah, we need y'all to give us the keys.
Sooner than later. All right, let me ask you some tough questions before we might have some questions. If you guys are out there watching, I saw Isai from the Casa fam jump in. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it. But I want to hit you with a few. The city's changing. Well, I don't live in LA City proper. I do work downtown and near the Arts District in Little Tokyo. Big ups, my Quantity and Associates fan. And I go out to eat, for lunch. And there's a scourge happening. I'm telling you, in downtown. I need to know what we're going to do about it. Can you commit today to making microwaving tortillas punishable? And I'm thinking, at first I was thinking prison. I was thinking maybe even more severe. But I was like, you know what? Let's just make these guys eat their own dog food. You know what I mean? What's your take on microwave tortillas?
No, never. Oh my God. No, that is sacrilegious. Why would you do that?
I got to tell you, I don't know the reason why, but I can. One thing that upsets me more than the microwave tortilla itself is the smirk on the Chicano waiter's face when he delivers it to me, thinking like he just gave me a shitty microwave tortilla, and that's okay somehow, and it's not, bro. So don't do that. Thank you for standing with us on such an important issue.
You need to find yourself a different restaurant.
You'd be surprised about how many of these. Listen, especially the busy Mexican restaurants, they're taking shortcuts left and right. And again, this is where earlier before we went live, I was bigging up the San Gabriel Valley, and you're shouting out downtown LA. I might concede that the Mexican food might be better in downtown LA than in Covina. That's for damn sure.
You need to get yourself over to Guerrilla Tacos. You need to
yeah. To walking distance from the spot. I do like it there. After a good lunch, I do like to come back. I keep a little bit of mouthwash in the car, you know what I'm saying? Blast it off before I get back into the office. Other people take a different route, and I'm wondering what your take is on this. Can we outlaw brushing your teeth at the work restroom, especially coming out of this pandemic? Can we really... What's your take? I mean, first, thank you for being considerate enough to maybe consider your oral hygiene for the office. But really, in the fucking restroom, brushing your teeth and spitting in the sink? What's your take on that, Dulce?
Why? Why would you do that? Yeah, I don't know. I've never done that. Go get like floss picks and do it in your desk.
Oh no!
No.
I'm gonna have to break with you on this one. I'm sorry. No, do not do that at your desk. Yeah. Whatever you do not do that at your desk.
I'm thinking like, no, like I'm thinking.
Oh, you're in your own office. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is shared workspace. This is really.
Oh yeah. Don't do it in
sort
shared
of ethic.
I mean, I have to admit, I haven't had an office in like 5 years.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the work you do now. So, what work do you do now? And then, How do you translate your work, your like 9 to 5, and that skill set into what you are planning to do as an LA City Council member?
Yeah. So first, I would start off. I ran a nonprofit in Los Angeles for about 9 years, and that was like an incredible experience of like a mixture of like startup and nonprofit and work and relationships being built. So that gave me an excellent grounding for A, like hustle, B, like raising money,
Mm.
and then C, like how you work with other people, right? So with a nonprofit, we work with a lot of museums and a lot of theaters, and it was always like, can can we use your space put on these like free public programs? So I got a great education in how to talk to people, how to interact with folks. And right now, I went back to my passion, which is in education. I was blessed enough to go to university, to have a full ride, to come out of it debt free, and to have certain people in my life who said, like, whether we like it or not, there is sort of like a stratum still in higher education, which we need to break down because every educational institution has incredible things to offer. So I work for Arizona State University. I work in higher ed. We've been trying to, get more Latinos to go to college, which we've increased our Latino population by like 100% in the last 6 years. So we're now fully like a Latino serving institution where 25% of the population is Latino, which is incredible. So I work in the Los Angeles space, growing our outreach, growing our partnerships with government agencies, with nonprofits, with school districts, not just LAUSD, but also smaller school districts in the area. And we do all sorts of stuff between like recruitment, research, projects, etc. So I always get really excited about the work. I always get really excited about education. And when I think about the city, I think about all the different things that the city could be doing in partnership with LAUSD in the educational space. I think about, especially during the pandemic, and the thing that comes most to mind as we were encouraging people to go outside and get some fresh air during the pandemic. District 9 is park poor. We
Mm.
have like the lowest number of green space per resident in this district. So could we open up the schools, which is where we have all of our green space? They're all been closed for the last year. Can we open them up to community members? And, as we look forward, can we make that happen? Because that's where, we can encourage recreation, we can encourage activity. Another thing is universal preschool and daycare. How do we partner with the city for those types of endeavors and programs, in addition to after school care, right? We've got so many women who have to, negotiate their schedule around child pickups and drop offs. And especially right now, as like all of the schedules are variable, I think about it, like it's so difficult to have a child right now and try to deal with all of the moving targets. So my heart goes out to both teachers and to parents right now.
No, as you're talking, I was reminded of why I'm attracted to your campaign. It's because my grandmother ran for Bassett Unified School District School Board when I was in junior high. And just the source of pride that we had as a family to see my grandmother out there campaigning, putting her campaign, whatever they're called, billets up around town. And then to get the mail that we would get at our house because she was an elected official, I'd get these magazines, Hispanic Leadership, Hispanic Executive, School Board District Minutes, California Superintendent newsletters. They'd all come to the mailbox, and I'd sit there and I'd read it, and I'd be like, wow, this is cool shit. And then it just reminds me that, of course, your campaign is going to inspire people who are watching at a distance, but the people who you will impact the most, win or not, and of course we're championing your campaign, are going to be the people immediately around you, and it's really hard to put a value on that, and it's going to translate for generations. So props, you already won by stepping out there, by championing a progressive platform. So thank you for spending time with us today. One more question before, if there are any questions out there, people can add in the chat. Are there some important dates coming up? And what can we do to more fully support what you're up to?
So, you can't run a campaign without money. And unfortunately, we still don't have fully public funded campaigns. My next deadline where I have to show how much money I've raised is June 30th. So we're really grinding to get a bunch of money in by the June 30th deadline. The maximum contribution amounts per person are $800. And I know there are some ballers out there in Gaza who can help me out. But really, any amount helps. Right now, we're trying to show strength in numbers, both financially and strength in numbers, like how many people donate to the campaign. So if you can donate as soon as possible, but definitely before June 30th, please do so. Money is how campaigns are measured, unfortunately. And the incumbent has access to a lot more money than I do. As I mentioned, he's been in office for 30 years. He's made quite some connections in that time. And I'm just starting out. I'm calling in all of my reinforcements right now to be able to propel me. So money is big. That June 30th deadline is big. If anyone out there wants to host a meet and greet, just like you have today, to introduce me to more folks, I am so happy to do any meet and greets in order to expand my network. So please reach out to me, Dulce at dulcevazquez.com. You can donate. You've got the wonderful lower thirds there, dulcevazquez.com. And then election day is next June 7th, 2022. So we do have some time. It is a very, very long campaign cycle, but it's going to take everything. Eventually, I'm going to need y'all to help with phone banking and text banking and walking the district too. We got to get some new kicks and we got to start knocking on doors. And at the end of it, we're all going to chill out with some Norwalk Brew or some South Central Brewing Co. collab, and we'll have some carne asada.
Let's do it. Dulce, thanks for joining us, and we're gonna show up and show out, as the young kids say. All right, Mestizo Coffee Click, you know what to do. Support. That's what's up. All right, guys, take care.